stand at the bank of the Hellespont. The water is cold. Your father was assassinated 2 years ago, murdered at his own wedding by his own bodyguard, and you have spent every day since making sure no one mistakes you for weak. Somewhere beyond the far shore lies the Persian Empire. You are 20 years old. You have already had rivals executed, a city destroyed, and an entire people sold into slavery, simply to reach this one moment. History will call you Alexander the Great. But that name still belongs to the future. Right now, there's only the crossing. Your father built the instrument. You simply had to learn to wield it. Philip II of Macedonia spent 30 years turning a backwater kingdom into a military machine capable of crushing the combined armies of Athens and Thebes. His most important invention was the sarissa, an 18-foot pike that gave Macedonian infantry an almost unfair reach advantage, and the phalanx formation that wielded it, 16 ranks deep, a wall of iron points that had never been broken in open battle. He had also spent years having you tutored by Aristotle, filling your head with philosophy, science, and the literature of a civilization already at its height. Then he was murdered by his own bodyguard at his own wedding celebration, and all of it, the army, the empire, the debts, the plan to invade Persia, became yours. You were 20 years old. The first thing you did was have the most dangerous potential rivals executed. The second was to march north and crush 2 rebellions before they gathered momentum. The third was to make an example of Thebes, razing the ancient city to rubble and selling its citizens into slavery, so that no other Greek city would calculate that defiance was worth the risk. By the spring of 334 BC, with Greece either allied or terrified, you were ready. The army that crossed the Hellespont with you numbered around 40,000 men, drawn from across Greece and Macedonia. At its core were 9,000 Macedonian phalangites, veterans of your father's wars, wielding their long sarissas and drilled to hold formation under almost any pressure. Alongside them, 3,000 elite hypaspists, shield bearers, faster and more flexible, protecting the phalanx's exposed flanks. 1,800 companion cavalry rode on the right wing, the shock troops you commanded in person. It was the finest army in the world. You crossed the narrow strait into Asia Minor and made your first gesture deliberately theatrical. You threw your spear into the soil of Persian territory, staking your claim before a single battle had been fought. Your father had planned this invasion. You intended to complete it and to make clear that what followed was yours alone. The Persian satraps, provincial governors, chose to meet you early, before you could advance deeper into their territory. They massed their cavalry, perhaps 10,000 horsemen, on the far bank of the river Granicus, in what is now northwestern Turkey, with Greek mercenary infantry held in reserve behind them. One of their advisors, a skilled commander named Memnon of Rhodes, serving in Persian employ, urged them not to fight. Burn the villages, he argued. Starve the Macedonians out. It was sound counsel. They ignored him. When you arrived at the Granicus and surveyed the Persian line, your senior general Parmenion advised waiting until dawn to cross. The banks were steep, the current uncertain, the enemy well positioned. A night crossing would give you more time to organize the attack properly. You ordered an immediate assault. You led your companion cavalry into the river yourself, drawing the full weight of the Persian line toward you. javelins, darts, and arrows striking the water around your men as they waded through the current. You were buying time for the phalanx to cross behind you, but it did not look like strategy. It looked like a king who had decided that the fastest way through a problem was straight at it. The Persian cavalry charged the moment your men reached the far bank. The fighting was immediate, close, and entirely personal. The Granicus broke in your favor. The phalanx crossed behind you. The Persian cavalry fled when they met that wall of sarissas, and the Greek mercenaries in reserve were surrounded before they could act. Asia Minor lay open. What followed was methodical. You took coastal cities to deny Persia its naval bases, then turned south and east. At Issus, a narrow coastal plain in what is now southern Turkey, Darius III himself led an army nearly twice your size across your line of retreat, intending to trap you. You attacked straight at his center. Darius fled in his chariot. His wife, mother, and children were taken alive and treated well. It was mercy and also sound policy. The final reckoning came at Gaugamela, near modern Mosul in Iraq, in 331 BC. Darius had chosen open ground to use his numbers, by some estimates, between 50 and 80,000 men. You feinted right with your cavalry, thinning the Persian center, then drove the companions through the gap at full speed. According to ancient sources, the Persian center collapsed almost immediately. Darius fled the field. Babylon opened its gates. Susa surrendered. The Persian Empire was yours. But you were not the same man who had crossed the Hellespont at Marikanda, modern Samarkand, in Uzbekistan. After drinking, you killed Clitus the Black in a rage. Clitus had saved your life at the Granicus. He was among your finest generals. The remorse was genuine. It changed nothing. Your men were watching you more carefully now. You wore Persian dress, adopted Persian rituals, and surrounded yourself with Persian advisors. When you demanded that Macedonian officers perform proskynesis, the full prostration reserved in Persian custom for kings and in Greek custom for gods, they refused. You were forced to retreat from the demand. The distance between you and your army was growing. At the river Hyphasis, in what is now the Punjab of northern Pakistan, it closed entirely. Your men had been marching for 8 years. They had heard reports of vast Indian armies further east. They refused to advance. You waited 3 days in your tent for them to change their minds. They did not. You turned the army around. The wound that nearly killed you came not in a great battle, but during an assault on a small Malian city, when you climbed the wall ahead of your own men and dropped alone into the courtyard. An arrow pierced your chest and punctured a lung. You survived. Few who had watched you fight were surprised. The march back through the Gedrosian desert, today the Makran coast of southern Pakistan, was catastrophic. Extreme heat, no water, failing supplies. Soldiers died in numbers no battle had managed. At Ecbatana, Hephaestion, your closest friend since childhood, died of fever. You went days without eating and ordered mourning across the empire. In Babylon, in the spring of 323 BC, you developed a fever. It did not pass. You died 11 days later, aged 32. The cause has never been established. Poison, typhoid, and the accumulated damage of years in the field have all been proposed. You left no succession plan. Your generals divided the empire and soon destroyed one another. Roxana and your son were murdered within years. Your gold sarcophagus ended up in Alexandria in Egypt. Its location today is unknown. What endured was not the empire. It was the ideas, Greek language, philosophy, and art, fused with Eastern traditions across continents. Whether it was worth it is a question the sources do not answer.